You're listening to Teach Me the Bible podcast, where we unpack the meaning of books, passages, and themes from Scripture. Join us each week as Dr. David Klingler walks us through God's Word and teaches the Bible. Each episode has a study guide available in the show notes. This is Teach Me the Bible podcast.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Webb, and I'm here with David Klingler today for our Teach Me the Bible podcast. And David, we're trying to get to the crucifixion. There's just so much here, and I know it's going to start picking up even more speed as we walk through this. We've walked through chapter 23, and now Jesus is going to have. There's a lot of red letters in these next couple of chapters. What's going on? What is Jesus introducing to us?
This is in chapters 24, 25 of Matthew. It's almost all red letters, as you say. This is what we call the Olivet Discourse. It's discourse. Jesus is talking, Olivet. He's talking on the Mount of Olives. Yeah. See how that works?
Yeah. It's really complicated.
We're really creative how we do that. The upper room discourse. That's John 13 through 17. That's where Jesus is talking in the upper room. Yeah. So Jesus has just come out of the temple. This is the beginning of chapter 24, verse 1. And Jesus came out of the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he answered and said to them, "Do you see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone shall be left upon another, which will not be torn down." Of course, this is the judgment that's going to come on Israel and Jerusalem in 70 A.D. That the whole Temple Mount, was destroyed. Only the foundation wall stones were left, and you can see some of those when you go there to Israel today. But anyway, and so then they continue to talk apparently, and they go up across, down across the Kidron Valley, which is just down the bottom of the hill, up the other side to the Garden of Gethsemane, or not Garden of Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives. Garden of Gethsemane is at the bottom of that hill. And when he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and saying, "Tell us when all these things shall be, and what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age?" Okay, so that question is important. That question is going to drive everything that Jesus is going to say all the way down through the end of chapter 25, right? There's no break here. And so everything that he's talking about is his answer to the question, tell us when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming, and what is the sign of the end of the age? The age, this generation, this is Israel's rejection of the Lord, rejection of their Christ. And so what's the end going to look like? And of course, we know from Old Testament that Israel is going to repent and return to the Lord at the end of the 70th week, or, in the middle of the 70th week of Daniel. And this is what Jesus is going to discuss. Now, one of the problems that we get into when we start to interpret these end-time discussions, and this is an eschatological, discussion, because Jesus has asked specifically about the end times, and this is what he's going to answer, is we bring in our theology, and then we don't let the author talk, don't let Jesus talk. And so we don't want to do that. We want to just listen to...
So are you warning us that as we walk through this, don't bring your preconceived ideas in?
Yeah. And remember, this goes all the way back. The story is being told by Matthew, quoting Jesus. And Jesus has already been talking about, remember back that the parable of the wheat and tares. This is in chapter 13, verse 24. "The kingdom of heaven will be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field, and while the men were sleeping, the enemy came in and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. And when the tares sprang up and bore grain, then the tares became evident." When the wheat sprang up and bore grain, then the tares became evident. "And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, 'Sir, did we not sow good seed in the field? How then are there tares?' And he said to them, 'As the enemy has done this.' And the slaves said to him, 'Do you want us then to go and gather them up, gather up the tares?' He said, 'No, lest while we are gathering up the tares, you root up the wheat with them.' allow both to grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather up the tares and bind them in bundles and burn them up, and gather the wheat into the barn, right? And so you've got the gathering of the tares and the gathering of the wheat. And so both groups are going to be gathered up, and that's the language that's going to be being used throughout here. So let's see what Jesus says.
Okay.
So Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one misleads you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and mislead many. And you will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for these things must take place, but it is not yet the end. Well, since then, there's been a lot of wars and rumors of
Quite
wars.
a bit, yes.
Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, still happening today. Various places there will be famines and earthquakes, and still happening today. All these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. Then they will deliver you to tribulation, and will kill you, and you will be hated by all the nations on account of my name. And at that time, many will fall away. We were talking about this before we started. This word fall away is, many will be scandalized. It's a word that Jesus has used all the way through the book. If your right eye causes you to be scandalized, cut it out. If your right hand causes you to be scandalized, cut it off. So the taking offense, that stumbling block, all of that type of language is it's about 19 times in the book. It's the word for scandalized, and and so what's happening here is at the end, many will be scandalized, many will fall away from following Christ, and will deliver up one another and hate one another, and many false witnesses, false prophets will arise and will mislead many. And because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end, he shall be saved. Now, we've read this already. Jesus has already said this in the book. This is back in chapter 10, I believe, chapter 10, verse 22. There's,
you will be hated by all.
Because
of my name.
Chapter 10. You will be hated by all on account of my name. This is brother will deliver up brother to death. Jesus is talking when he sends out his disciples. He says, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go out and you're going to enter into a city, and if it's worthy, you stay there, and if it's not worthy, you shake off your feet and shake off the dust from your feet and continue on. But verse 19, they will deliver you up. Do not become anxious on how or what you'll speak, for in that hour you will be given what to speak. For it is not you who speak, but it is the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. And brother will deliver up brother to death, and father his child, and children will rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated on account of my name. But it is the one who endures to the end who will be saved. So Jesus has already been telling his disciples this all the way through. This is what to expect. Not only what you should expect in the end times, but what you should expect during this whole generation, right? That they're going to hate you on account of Christ's name. But at the end, it's going to be the same, intensified. But the one who endures to the end shall be saved. Remember who he's talking to. He's asking, what's the end of the sign of the end of the age? And there's a lot of things that we learn from the Old Testament that are going to be happening during this, what we call the 70th week of Daniel. It's going to begin with Israel making a covenant with Antichrist. Then the two prophets are going to show up on the scene, and they're going to start to pronounce judgments upon Israel to get them to repent. The two prophets are going to be put to death. They're going to lay dead in the street for 3 days. They're going to stand up. The voice is going to say, come up here. The abomination of desolation is going to happen, where Antichrist enters into the temple and declares himself to be God. And at this point, this is when Israel knows, we made a bad mistake.
We picked the wrong side.
They picked the wrong side. They align themselves with the Lord. And then the Great Tribulation. There's the 70th week is called the tribulation period, but the Great Tribulation, the last 3.5 years, this is when it gets really bad for the elect, for the believers. They're going to flee into the wilderness. That's what Jesus is about to say. Verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for a witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let him who is on the housetop not go down to get his things out of his house, and let him who is in the field not return to get his cloak. But woe to those who are with children, and those who nurse babes in those days. But pray for your flight, that it may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not have occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor forevermore. This is right out of Daniel chapter 12. And unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days shall be cut short. So if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or here he is, do not believe him. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders and mislead many, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I've told you in advance. If therefore they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, go forth, or he's in the inner rooms, do not believe him. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Wherever the corpse is, the vultures will gather. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the earth will be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man shall appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see him coming on the clouds with power and great glory. So you're not going to miss the coming of Christ, right? You know, they're not going to miss it. He's going to be coming on the clouds. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds of from one end of the sky to the other end of the sky. Now, he's already said, many are called, but a few are elect. Many are called, few are electos, chosen. Talking about Israel, that that the invitation has gone out to Israel to believe, but they have not believed. But Israel will believe in the end. All of Israel shall be saved at the end, and that's Paul's tells us this. But Paul's getting it from the Old Testament, right? So learn of the parable of the fig tree. Now remember the fig tree. Jesus has cursed the fig tree back just in the previous chapters. This was back in chapter 21, and now he's going to say, so learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branches have already become tender, it puts forth leaves. You know that summer is near. It's time to bear fruit. Even so, you too, when you see these things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. For truly I say to you, this generation shall not pass away until all these things have taken place. Now, that's where people get tripped up. They're not recognizing. This is a reference back to Deuteronomy chapter 32, the Song of Moses, where Moses says, this is a crooked and perverse generation, sons in whom there is no faithfulness. They've rejected the Lord, rejected the rock of his salvation. And you'll remember Jesus was just saying to the Jews that he was teaching, they're saying, they are guilty of all the blood of all the prophets, and not only the blood of the prophets, as their fathers were, but they're also guilty of the blood of Christ. And so all of the sins are being laid at the feet of this generation, right? And so this generation that rejects the prophets and rejects Christ shall not pass away until all this is fulfilled, right? And so that's the generation he's talking about. It's this church age, we call it a church age, where Israel's increasingly and now almost completely rejected their Christ. But they will look upon him whom they pierced, and they will believe. And so verse 36, but that day and that hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, nor the Father, but the Father alone. So if anyone's out there predicting the date,
right,
don't listen.
Yeah.
Right. Just look for the signs that the Lord has warned us to look for. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like in the days of Noah. For in those days, which were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark. In other words, they're just going about normal life and doing their stuff.
No worries.
Yeah, no worries. And then came the flood, right? then there shall be two men in the field, and one shall be taken, the other be left. Two grinding on the mill, one will be taken, the other be left. Therefore be alert, for you do not know which day the Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known what day what time of night the thief was coming, he would have been on alert and not allowed the house to be broken into. For this reason, you too be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour when you do not think he will come. So this is pretty straightforward instruction. Now, remember at this time, the temple was still standing. Now, when we're in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, there's instruction, information given on the end times. And so if we turn back to Daniel chapter 9, and we, question is how far down into this hole do we want to go?
Yeah. I was going to say, you've gone longer than I expected before turning to Daniel.
Yeah. So in Daniel chapters 2 and Daniel chapter 7, you get the dream of Nebuchadnezzar and then the night visions of Daniel. And both of those are revelation of the kingdoms that are going to rule over Israel. The Babylonians are going to come, then the Medes and the Persians and the Greeks and then the Romans. And so in chapter 9, when we get over to chapter 9, Daniel already knows that there's going to be 4 kingdoms that are going to rule over the land. But he's looking in the book of Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah 29, 1 through 10, where 70 years have been proclaimed for Israel and for their people. So Israel didn't keep the Sabbath for 70 years, and so 70 years have been decreed for Israel, and they're going to have to endure these 70 years. That's 29, 1 through 10. 29, 11, that's a verse everybody knows. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Well, here's the problem. If Israel is judged by the Lord, this is per the law, per the book of Leviticus, chapter 26. If the Lord judges them with war, with famine, with whatever, with plagues, whatever it is, and they don't respond to that judgment, if they don't respond to the war, to the famine, to the enemies, to the exile even, then judgment will be poured upon them sevenfold. And so 70 years they have been in exile. And Daniel says, all right, Lord, it's 70 years. It's time to go home, right? He says, no. Israel will not be gathered back completely into the land because they have not repented. And so 77s have been decreed for you and for your people. They say it's 70 weeks. That's how they translate it. So it's chapter 9, verse 24, 70 weeks. It's actually 77s. 70 sets of 7 have been decreed for your people and for your holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision of prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. There's a lot there, right?
Yeah.
And so you're looking for this decreed for you and for your people to finish the transgression, to make an end to sin, to make atonement for iniquity, and to seal in everlasting righteousness. So you are to know and to discern that from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. All right, so it's so a total of 69 times 7, 483 years. That's going to take from the decree issued in 444 all the way till the crucifixion of Christ, to the day. I mean, he enters in. This is the triumphal entry, and it is to the day.
Which the timing where he's given this Olivet discourse.
Yeah, this is where he's
just saying, Daniel, here we are. Yeah,
we're about to wait for it. Wait for it now. Now, and now at the end of the 7 weeks and 62 weeks, then there's going to be a delay. It says, then Messiah. Then after the 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. What will be the sign of the end of this age, Jesus? When is it going to happen? He says, look at this temple. They're asking him to look at the temple. He says, look at it. It's all going to be destroyed. Well, where's he getting that? Well, first of all, he's Jesus. He knows everything. But secondly, Matt, this was what Daniel says. The people of the prince who is to come, the Antichrist, people of Antichrist, Rome, will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war, and desolations are determined. Right? And so Jesus is saying this is what's going to happen. The temple's going to be torn down. But then we go to verse 27. Then he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Antichrist will make a firm covenant with Israel for 1 week, 7-year period, week, 7 years. But in the middle of the 7 years, he will put a stop to sacrifice of grain offering, and on the wing of abomination will come one who makes desolate, even until the complete destruction of the one is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So Antichrist is going to enter into the temple. He's going to declare himself to be God. We learned this in chapter 11, going into chapter 12. And this is what we call the abomination of desolation, right?
Right.
Now, at this point, this mid-trib point, then Michael, the great prince, who stands guard over your people, this is in chapter 12, verse 1, stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as has never occurred since there was a nation until that time. Jesus says the exact same thing in the Olivet Discourse. At that time, your people, everyone who's found written in the book, shall be saved, shall be rescued. The one who endures to the end shall be saved. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Right? And so the timeline set forth in the Old Testament, at least the last week, which is what Jesus is talking about, this last 7-year period, is going to begin with a firm covenant between Israel and the Antichrist. And then Antichrist is going to enter into the temple. If he's going to enter into the temple, there has to be a temple.
Yeah, you have to build the temple.
So you got to build the temple back. So it's going to be destroyed, but it's going to be rebuilt. The temple hasn't been rebuilt on Temple Mount yet, and so we're at least 3.5 years out. He hasn't
Right.
And then time of great tribulation, and then the Christ returns and resurrection occurs. So Jesus is just explaining to his disciples really everything that's already been said in the Old Testament. There's nothing new here, other than after Christ's death, burial, resurrection. We get this we don't get this out of Matthew, but out of the book of Acts. Jesus' disciples ask him, "Is now the time you're restoring the kingdom?" Okay, all of it's happened, right? The 7 weeks, the 62 weeks, the delay. You're here. Is it now time to establish the kingdom? He says, no. The 70th week has not yet begun, and the 70th set of 7, and that's going to be the culmination. And so the disciples in their question are asking Jesus, tell us about Daniel 12. Tell us about Daniel 9 through 12. Tell us about what's going to happen at the end. And so Jesus is just answering with really nothing new. This is all stuff that was in the Old Testament, right? So let's pick it back up down in chapter 24. So he says, "So who then is the faithful and sensible slave?" 24 verse 45. "Whom the master will put in charge of his household to give them food at the proper time. Blessed is the slave who his master finds him doing when he comes." So doing it when he comes. "I say to you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But the evil slave that says in his heart, 'My master's not coming for a long time,' will begin to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that slave will come on that day when he does not expect, and at the hour he doesn't know, and he will cut him into pieces and assign him to the place of the hypocrites." Now, who are the hypocrites?
Pharisees.
So the hypocrites aren't in.
Right.
And if your righteousness doesn't exceed the Pharisees and the scribes, the hypocrites, you're not in, right? And there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that's not where you want to go, right? So maybe we should shut it down here, but Jesus doesn't shut it down here. He continues to talk. So then, the kingdom of heaven will be compared to 10 virgins. We'll talk about the 10 virgins next time. He talks about the parable of the virgins, the parable of the talents, and then the judgment that's coming. And so Jesus isn't coming up with anything new here. Now, how does that inform us? Well, remember who he's talking to. He's talking to his Jewish disciples, and they're asking him about the temple and about the end of the age. Well, the end of the age ends with the return of Christ to the earth to establish his kingdom. There's no mention of rapture here or anything like that. That's not what Jesus is being asked, nor is that what he's answering, right? We're going to get that later in the book of Revelation and some of Paul's writings, that type of thing. He's just talking about at the end. When the time comes, you don't want to be one that's hauled off into the weeping and gnashing of teeth. You want to be, both groups are going to be gathered. The elect are going to be gathered and ushered into the kingdom. And the non-elect, the tares, they're going to be gathered and burned. They're going to be put in the place of the hypocrites where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth.
So just a quick question. Those elect, chosen, a lot of times when you see that or hear that phrase, see that, read that, it's talking about Israel.
Right.
So is he still, because Matthew's writing about Israel.
Still talking about Israel.
So we're still talking about, in chapter 24, 25, we want to read the church into those chapters. So we need to refrain from, and that's what we started today. Don't bring your thoughts into the reading. Let's let the reading happen. And Jesus is just answering that question.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in chapter 24, verse 31, when he says this, they will send forth his angels, a great trumpet, and gather his elect from the four winds, from one
into the sky
to the other. Some take that to be where he's gathering his, the church, and some have argued that the problem, at least what I see with that, is that would be not how he uses this in the book. Back in chapter 22, the king said to his servants, "Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness." This is in 22, verse 13. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. So that's the electos there. Unless the days of those days had been cut short, this is in 24, verse 22, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days had been cut short. Well, the days that he's talking about is the days of great tribulation. And we know the great tribulation is the second half of the tribulation. And so there he's talking about the elect again, unless those days have been cut short. For the sake of the elect, those days have been cut short. So I don't see him changing categories here. I think he's just answering the question, what will be the sign of the end of the age?
Right, good. Okay, well, still more to come. So I want to thank you for another day in the Word. So thank you, David, and all those listening or watching. Thank you for joining with our podcast. So I want to encourage you to go back and read chapter 24 and then get ready for chapter 25. Just to summarize, let's the best that we can. Try not to read the church into Jesus dealing with the nation of Israel, because he is their Messiah. So, all right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Teach Me the Bible podcast. Our desire is to use the power of God's Word to change lives. For more information, download our app. Join us next week for another episode of Teach Me the Bible.